Hello everybody. Today we're going to talk about the OpenAI Agent SDK. We'll take a look at an example. With that example, you will learn how agents do handoffs, how they can use tools, and how there's memory when you're having a long conversation with multiple agents in one session. So let's consider an example where there is a user. The user is going to interact with an agent. In this case, this agent is going to be called a triage agent. The triage agent is an entry point where it decides how or to who the query should go to if it can't answer itself. Now, if I were to bring that right here, and let's consider who the next agent is going to be. That agent is going to be a financial agent. Let's consider another example, another agent. This agent is going to be a investment agent, right? So the financial agent can actually talk to you about financials, your financials. So what does that mean? That means that this guy has access to a couple of more things. It has access to your data, right? So your data may be a CSV, a Parquet file, or whatever. No, it has access to that. And given this is your personal data, it can look at that personal data and answer questions. Now, the financial agent will use a tool, so it will not directly query it, but it will use a SQL agent. And so the way these arrows should connect is, let's just move this right here. We have your personal data, and we have the SQL agent. And so what's going to happen is that this is going to call the SQL agent. The SQL agent then is going to look at your data and then compute and send that back to the financial agent. And then you can have questions, and you can ask further questions to the financial agent. Next, as I talked about, there will be an investment agent. The investment agent is an agent who you can talk to about your investments and recent ups and downs in stocks and shares. So you can talk about that to the investment agent. Then we also have another agent called the wealth agent. The wealth agent essentially lets you, plan your wealth. So you have this complete package is where you have a financial agent, tells you about your current situation, and you can talk about it, you can analyze that. Then you have an investment agent that lets you ask questions about your investments, and then you have a wealth agent. Now, these agents have tools assigned to them, right? So how do they do that is that the wealth agent in this case will have access to a vector database. And in this case, the vector database will have a PDF file. So it'll have a PDF file, which is like a book that it has access to. And so when you're interacting with Wealth Agent, it'll look up the PDF and then will answer you given the query and what the PDF has. Then we have the investment agent. The investment agent will have access to the web. So yes, so it will have access to the web. And the reason it will have access to the web is because it needs to essentially query the latest prices for stocks and shares. And in a similar fashion, you will also have the SQL agent also have access to the web. The reason is it's using DuckDB essentially to query the data, to create a SQL query and then actually execute the query. So the SQL query SQL has a lot of flavors, and of course you want to make sure that it looks up the documentation of DuckDB in order to create a right SQL query. So yeah, so this is a system that we're going to look at in code right now. So let's move on there. Now, as we go through this, the first thing I think the best way to demonstrate this is we're going to interact with the agent first. So let's go then. First thing that we have is we have an entry point, and so we press enter and we are there. We can ask now questions. So what can you help me with? Let's see what it says. Okay, it answers, it can answer questions on financial transactions and so on and so forth. So cool. So I can say, what is my total balance as of now? Let's look at that. Okay, so here's my sort of total balance. Now again, it's looking up my data, my personal data, which is saved in like a pandas data frame that it is querying, and all of that is of course living in like a JSON file. Okay, so I've got this. The next thing I can say is what are the best performing stocks and shares. So at this point you can see that I was talking to a financial agent that answered this question. And now I've asked a question that's about stocks and shares. So let's see what happens next. An investment agent responds now. It tells me what are the best stocks and shares. It tells me what about S&P 500. I generally invest in UAG. So let's see what it says. Okay, so it's taking a bit of time, and it looks up the internet and tells me some prices about that. So let's essentially, what I wanted to calculate is if I were to invest my total balance, what would be the return after 1 year? Let's see if it's able to answer this question. Okay, it says if you invest a total balance of 168, the 1 year return will be 10.52, which is essentially 17,763. Okay, cool. So it's able to do these calculations. This looks to me right just about right. Okay, can you give me advice on how I generate wealth with small investments over a decade? Okay, let's see. So we were talking to the investment agent, and now I think we should be passed to the wealth agent. Let's wait and see. The wealth agent actually has access to the PDF, so it gives me some, I guess, actionable advice. So again, a wealth agent response here. It says, invest in quality businesses, follow a simple game plan, identify high quality companies, buy at reasonable prices, hold on for long term, repeat the process essentially. Cool. Be patient. All right. So, and educate yourself. Yeah. Cool. All right. So all of this sort of sounds reasonable and that it makes sense. So what you just saw right now is that we were able to navigate multiple agents, and the agents were able to hold the conversation as they were going between each other. And we use lots of tools, and there was also handoffs that actually happened here. Cool. So now let's go take a look at the code really quickly. Now all of this code will be available on GitHub. So I'm going to race through as to how this is done, but you can take a look later, right? So cool. So the first thing is that we need to sort of look at is the agent.py. The agent.py is where I have defined agents. So here is the SQL query agent, which has a prompt behind it. It has access to the web search tool. It has access to some other functions. It can execute the SQL as well. And again, if I just really quickly look at execute SQL, what you will see is that it loads the data. It looks at, creates a table. It gets, it takes a SQL query. The SQL query actually comes from another function, and then it basically strips that away, cleans that a little bit, and then executes that SQL query. So that's what SQL query does. And get table columns. So essentially, get table columns is the one that essentially gets the columns. There you go, right? So you know when you're creating what columns you have with you, so that you're not going to make up some stuff, right? And you will notice that as we are calling these functions, the Agent SDK says that it has this sort of decorator, which is add function tool. When you use that, you can actually, this will be passed into an LLM, proper descriptions, and so you need to make sure that you have doc strings, and it's going to convert that into its sort of, and it's going to return that back to you. So essentially, they're just a handy way of giving you structure back with the correct inputs. And OpenAI by themselves do not execute these functions. These functions get executed on your system. What they do is essentially take the code and interpret, get the right inputs to it, and return those inputs back to you, right? That's all that they do. So in this case, the get table columns gets the columns, and only those columns are used here in execute SQL, where we execute the SQL commands. Cool. Of course, making sure model settings is tool choice is set to required. That means that it's going to use the tools. Okay, so that's the SQL query agent. We have the financial agent. The financial agent right here again has a prompt, but essentially what it does is uses the SQL query agent as a tool rather than as like a handoff, right? So what you will notice, just going down really quickly, is when we talked about the triage agent, the triage agent can actually perform handoffs. So once it receives a request, it can hand off, given that request, it can hand off to the financial agent, investment agent, or a wealth agent. Or in this case, a financial agent can hand off to an investment agent. An investment agent can actually hand off to the financial or the wealth agent. So there's lots of handoffs that is happening. But you will notice that I have not used the SQL query agent in the financial agent as a handoff, but it's as a SQL. It's because when you do a handoff, you hand off the control to another agent. But I don't want that in this case. I want to make sure that the financial agent holds the control, and it uses SQL query agent just as a tool to get some inputs and then teach there. Just moving on, we have we have the web search tool here for the investment agent. For the wealth agent, what we do is we have a file search tool. So, and it's accessing a vector database. The vector database is created here. We upload the PDF to the vector database, and essentially carries on from there. To give you a bit of an idea, right now the data is stored in financial_transaction.json, and it looks like this. So we have the date, we have the year, we have the month, credit, salary, the amount, and the description. That's what the data looks like. And the PDF is stored here, which again is being used by the wealth agent. You can create the financial transactions by going into utils, generate data. Here you can tweak and generate the fake data. And the utils also has this download PDF. It just downloads the PDF, which you see right here. So that was really quick. Sort of you can take a look at the code more in depth about sort of different prompts that I've used and other functions. One thing to know here is that what is really important to look at is if you go to the OpenAI, if we go to the logs, now we have just recently had lots of interactions with it, right? So if I go into traces, you will see that we have executed some calls here. So yes, we have the triage agent. It goes here, it goes to the financial agent. There is a handoff that happens here. The financial agent has these tools at its disposal, and it generates a response. Let's take a look at what response it does create. Okay. This is the full history of the right. So what we need is, we can see that it started, let's load more. Okay, we said, okay, so what can you help me with? We have a function called here to the financial agent. Then what happens is that there is a SQL agent that's being called, and we can see that it does this. Now, it seems it doesn't have balance, it figures out. And so what it does, it looks at the amount as total balance, and it gets that amount. So what you can see here is tried something, and it retries it again. Then it transfers to the investment agent and looks up, all the information that we looked at. And then I said, what about VAG? Yeah, it kept going there. Then it calculated using some division, multiplication tools. And then we asked about what would be the advice for starting small to build wealth. And then it transferred to wealth agent. And then it looked up, basically lots of files here. This is essentially looking at the vector database that gets created by default. Database. OpenAI doesn't let you really tweak how you create, like how you really chunk the data. It was not really clear from the documentation, but I think that should change hopefully soon. But yes, but here we have the file search, and then we end there. So yeah, so what you just saw here is all the work that we did on the terminal. You could really see here in action. So that is all that I wanted to show. Again, I'll push all of this code to GitHub and then play around and let me know how it is. Again, there are some important things that I haven't covered, like evaluation, for example, right? So evaluation is super important here. So I think at some point I will come back with a video explaining evaluation, but I hope that this gives you a good understanding of how these handoffs, how memory, and how tools are used between agents. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.